Hello everyone, welcome to a new tutorial presented by the SH How to Be. In this tutorial, we are going to see the muscles of the head. Now, the muscles of the head, as we are going to see, we are going to divide it from superficial to deep. But the first thing to note about the muscles of the head is that there are three major classes of muscles of the head. Number one will be the facial muscles. All the muscles which are in the face are the facial, which are on the facial bones are the facial muscles. The next one will be the muscles of mastication. So all the muscles that are going to be used in mastication are going to be classified under it. The next one will be the muscle in audition. And the two main muscles in audition are stapedius muscle and the tensor tympanic. So these are the two main muscles of audition. Later on, there are also other muscles in the pharynx which are going to be considered inside the muscles of the neck, and the other major muscles that you can also see inside are going to be the palatine muscles. We are going to have the tensor palatini and the levator palatini. So these are the four main classes of muscles that we have. Now let's start. So when visualizing this human body, we realize that we can see superficial facial muscles. Point number one, all the facial muscles are going to be supplied by the facial nerve. All the facial muscles are supplied by the facial nerve. So we realize that in our study, the first thing to note again is that in our study of muscles, we are going to study muscles in terms of three things. The first one will be in terms of the origin and insertion of the muscle. The second one will be in terms of the action of the muscle, and the third one will be in terms of the nervous supply. So we won't say again the nervous supply of all the facial muscles study right now. So we are going just to speak about the origin and insertion and the action, because we already know that all the facial muscles are supplied by the facial nerve. Now, all the muscles of mastication plus the mylohyoid muscle, which we are going to consider that in the neck muscles, are considered as are supplied by the trigeminal nerve. Now, the tensor tympani is going to be supplied by the trigeminal nerve, while the stapedius inside the tympanic cavity is going to be supplied by the facial nerve. The muscles of the palatine bone, the levator palatini and the levator palatini and the tensor palatini are mostly supplied by the glossopharyngeal nerve. So those are the main points to note. So now let's see again the muscles of the head. So point number one, this muscle here is the frontalis muscle. So we have frontal belly of the muscle. Now the action is to elevate the eyebrow. So we can see the action of the muscle here. So we have the frontal muscle. The frontal muscle, we say that it's going to have an origin here, which is going to be the epicranial aponeurosis, and the insertion will be located here. And we need to note that most of the muscles of the facial muscles have their insertion on the skin or the fascia of the body. So that's why they have action. Their action is always in order to twist or do a tension on the skin. Now let's see a model which has the nerve supply to the facial muscle. So let's see the nerve supply to the facial muscle. We see that the nervous supply to the facial muscle will be as such. It comes from the facial nerve, and this branch of the facial nerve is going to be temporal branch to the facial muscle. So that will be for the facial muscle. Now, arterial supply of the facial muscle we are going to realize that the arterial supply of the fascial muscle will be as such to the fascial muscle. It goes up to fascial muscle via this artery, as we are going to study in the latter section. And the next one, we are going to also see that it can also have an arterial supply from here. So these are the two main arterial supply of the fascial muscle. So realize that it's going to come from the external carotid artery, then pass up to the superficial temporal artery. The superficial temporal artery is going to give an anterior branch to the fascial muscle, and also is going to pass from the ophthalmic artery. Ophthalmic artery is going to give the two branches, the supraorbital artery and the supratrochlear artery, to the frontalis muscle. So now let's see the next muscle. In order to see them, we are going to remove all the arterial supply. Now let's come back to the next muscle. The next muscle is going to be this muscle called procerus. So procerus muscle is a muscle which is found here. It originates at this portion at the top portion, and it inserts here. Now let's see the nervous path of the procerus. So now, to see the nervous part of the procerus, we just highlight here and isolate. So this is the nervous part of the procerus. So realize that it's going to come from here. This is the fascial portion, the fascial nerve. The fascial nerve gives a temporal portion, and it gives another portion here, which is we need to know that the fascial nerve divides into 5 portions. We have one portion above the temporal portion, one portion here is the zygomatic portion, one portion here is the buccal portion, the one portion down is the marginal mandible, and last portion is the cervical portion. Now this portion here is a zygomatic portion. So the zygomatic portion is the one which is going to come and is going to be used to supply the procerus. So this zygomatic portion is going to supply the procerus, and this other portion of temporal portion is also going to supply the procerus. So these are the two main portions which are being used. The next one is the arterial supply. The arterial supply of the procerus will be as such. Now we see that the procerus is the external carotid goes up, is going to give the branch which is going to be called the lingual artery, the fascial artery. The lingual artery goes to the tongue, just by the name ling. When you hear lingual, just think of the tongue, or when you hear glossus, just think of the tongue. The lingual, this is going to be the fascial artery. The fascial artery is going to pass down at the anterior portion of the ramus of the anterior portion of the angle of the mandible. Then it's going to come up to the procerus as such. So it's going to give this one portion of the fascial artery. So we see that the procerus receive arterial supply from the fascial artery. Now let's go to another muscle. So that's lastly, the action of the procerus is to depress the eye in a frowning direction. So it's as if you are frowning. Now the next one, let's go now to the corrugator supercilii, or the depressor supercilii. So the corrugator supercilii is going to be used in order still to depress the eye in the direction of the nose. So the first thing to note is that's the action, the origin. We can see the origin at this point. So we have here information, the origin of the insertion. Origin is medial part of the orbital margin. So at the medial part of the orbital margin, you have the depressor supercilii. The action is to pull the eyeball and skin downward as such in the frowning direction, and the skin and subcutaneous tissue under the eyeball. So I initially told you that the muscles have an insertion. So you have to know that muscles have an insertion on the skin for it to have a direct action on it. So originates here, it inserts at the level of the skin here, and we can see now the different arteries, the nerves which can be used. So let's see the nerve, isolation of the nerve. Now we see that the temporal part of the fascial nerve is going to be used to supply with, and the zygomatic part of the fascial nerve also going to be used to supply the corrugator supercilii or the depressor supercilii. Now let's see this next muscle. So we are going to remove now the arterial portion. Now let's see the next muscle. The next muscle is the Orbicularis Oris. The Orbicularis Oculi. This is Orbicularis Oris and this is Orbicularis Oculi because close to the eye. The Orbicularis Oculi comprise of two main parts. You have the orbital part, which is close to the orbital part of the eye, and you have the parapebral part close to the eyelids. So these are the two main parts. When you want to close, the action is to slightly, the parapebral part causes a slight closure of the eye, while the orbital part causes a forced closure of the eye. So these are the action. The origin, you see that around the orbital plate. So we have the different informations here. We have the origin, orbital part, medial part of orbital margin, all that. So insertion is all through here. The insertion will be on the skin located here, and the action, it closes the eyelid. When you want to close the eyelid slowly, it's going to use the palpebral part. When you want to close the eyelid strongly, you use the orbital part. So now let's see the nervous supply. So nervous supply of the orbital part, we still realize that it's going to be this portion, the the temporal portion and the zygomatic portion. Now let's go to the next portion. The next muscle, when you want to visualize this muscle, the next muscle you can see again, we have already seen all the muscles which are around the eye. So now let's go now to the muscles which are around the nose. So we've seen the muscles which are around the eye. We said corrugator supercilii and procerus. Now let's see the muscle around the nose. This muscle here is going to be called the transverse part of the nasalis, or even the nasalis muscle. So the nasalis muscle consists of its transverse part and the alagnacy, which is closer, and the alar part. The alar part is used to open the nose. So the alar part is going to be used to open your nose. You have different parts. You have the transverse part and the alar part. Why the transverse part is going to widen the nose. So these are the two actions. It originates at this level of the nose, and it inserts on the skin. So now let's see the nervous supply of the transverse part of the nasal bone. So nervous supply, we isolate it. So we see that it's going to receive now nerves from the zygomatic part. It's also going to receive from the buccal part, and slightly going to receive from the marginal mandibular. So it's mostly going to receive from the zygomatic part and the buccal part of the facial nerve. So it's not going to receive from marginal mandibular. So this is the fascia, the buccal part and the zygomatic part that is going to receive. Now let's see the arterial supply to the nasalis muscle. So the arterial supply to nasalis muscle is going to be as such. So we have arterial supply. It receives the blood from here, the facial nerve. So it's going to come up as such to give to the procerus. Now let's go to the next portion. We come to the bone. It's okay. Now the next muscle, since we have seen one of the muscles close to the nose, we can now see the next muscle of the nose. The next muscle close to the nose is this one, is the levator. This muscle here is a levator nasi, is a levator labis superioris alagnacy. It should not be forgotten, that one. So we have two levator labis superioris. We have the levator labis superioris, which is medial, and we have a levator labis superioris, which is lateral. The levator labis superioris, which is medial, is called levator labis superioris alagnacy muscle, while the one which is lateral is just levator labis superioris. So now to see the nervous supply, we see already the origin now here. We have the different origin of the muscle, origin at the lower part of the orbital plate to the different skin. It's at this portion that's going to insert. So now you have this. You now isolate to find the nerve. So the nervous supply will be from the number one, the zygomatic part, and number two, the buccal part. So we have this is a nervous supply to the levator labis superioris alagnacy. Now let's see the arterial supply. Arterial supply, let's see, you realize it's going to still come from the fascial nerve. So arterial supply is not what to see again, because it's going to always come from the fascial artery. So now let's see the next muscle. The next muscle now is this muscle here. This muscle is going to be called the levator labii superior. It's the lateral portion of the levator labii superior alignancy. So it just does the levator labii superior. So when we isolate the arterial supply, it's still from the fascial nerve, and when we isolate the nervous supply, we are going to realize that it's going to be still the zygomatic and the buccal portion of the fascial nerve just supplying it. Now let's come to the next muscle. The next muscle is this lateral muscle here. It's going to be the Zygomaticus Minor. So you need to know that the Zygomaticus is also split into two, just like the levator labii superioris. You have the Zygomaticus Minor, which is medial, and you have the Zygomaticus Major, which is lateral. The Zygomaticus Minor, I can already expect that it's going to receive from the zygomatic portion, because it's called Zygomaticus Minor, and we also have another part is going to be from the nerve from the buccal region. So let's isolate and find the nervous. You see here that it has fascial nerve origin from this part of the fascial nerve called the zygomatic part, and the buccal part of the fascial nerve. So now the next muscle is this lateral muscle here, and this lateral muscle is called Zygomaticus Major. Similar to Zygomaticus Minor, it's going to have the same muscle origin. Now, having seen all the muscles surrounding the nose, we have again this lower muscle called the Depressor muscle. Depressor muscle. So to see the original, to see the isolate of the nerve, you see that it's always going to receive from the zygomatic part and the buccal part. So now let's see the next one. So we already have to realize that the temporal part is up. When you are close to the eye, you are going to receive the temporal part. When you are close to the nose, you are going to receive from the zygomatic part, and when you are close to the mouth, you are going to receive from the buccal part. So that's already a conclusion that we can take from here. So now the next muscle we can see, so these are the muscles. Now this other muscle here are the alar part of the nasalis muscle. So they are still used. You had this part, the transverse part, and this other part, the alar part. Alar part is only used to widen. It's only used to open up the nares, anterior nares, while the transverse part is used to widen the nares. Now let's go to the muscles which are closer to the mouth. The first one that we are going to start with is going to be the Orbicularis Oris. Here was Orbicularis Oculi. Now here's Orbicularis Oris. Orbicularis Oris, in order to see the nervous, we are going to isolate them. To isolate the nerve, we see that the nerve here is going to be from buccal. It's going to be, because it's close to the nose still, it's going to be from zygomatic, and it's also going to be from marginal mandibular part of the fascial nerve. So these are all the nerves which are involved here. Now, close to the nose, we can go laterally. We have this lateral portion here, which is called the risorius muscle. The risorius muscle contraction is used to make you smile. Now, the muscle of Orbicularis Oris contraction is used to make the mouth to close, and even make you to frown. Now, these other muscles can be used to elevate the angles of the mouth and the labia. This is why they are called levator labii superioris and zygomaticus. They can elevate the labii toward their nose. So that's the action of these lateral muscles. This lateral muscle here, the result is used in smiling. So we can see lateral muscles there. Now here we have the Depressor Anguli Oris. Now the Depressor Anguli Oris, from the name you see that it depresses the angle of the mouth. That's the action. The origin, insertion, lateral portion of the mouth to this portion. You can see that it inserts here at level of the skin of the mouth and originates at this portion at the close to the mental protuberance. So now let's go and see the action. We see that the nerve is already located slightly, it's located lower to the mouth, so it's going to receive the marginal mandibular and buccal. So let's see. So it's going to receive from the marginal mandibular and the buccal. The nerve, the zygomatic nerve, the zygomatic part is not quite really used in this portion. It's mostly for the marginal mandibular and the buccal. So depending on the zone in which they are located, the different parts of the facial nerve are going to be used. So you can already see from here. So now, after having this muscle, we are going to have this muscle here called the mentalis, the depressor labii inferioris. We have this depressor labii inferioris here. Here we are going to have the other muscle called the mentalis muscle. So let's try to go deeper to the muscles. So muscular, we go a bit deeper. So when we go deeper, we have this. We have removed the superficial muscle. Yes, correlator supercili. Yes, the nasalis muscle. So let's go again slightly deeper. Now when we go slightly deeper, we see another muscle here. So when we go slightly deeper, this other muscle can be seen, and this muscle is called the buccinator. You see that the buccinator is found deep, and it is used in, when it contracts, it's used to make sure that the food does not accumulate in the vestibules of the mouth, and that the food that you are eating should always be found in the oral cavity for you to always masticate. So the buccinator is used for that. Then the artery, since it's located close to the nose and it's located in the mouth and close to the mandible, it implies it's going to receive at the venous drainage and nervous supply both from the zygomaticus branch of the facial nerve, the buccal branch, and the marginal mandibular branch. So let's see. So we see that it's going to receive from all of them. No, it's not this muscle, but instead the buccinator. So this is the buccinator. We see that it's going to receive from all the branches. We see that there is branch of the zygomatic, the buccal branch, mostly for the buccal branch, not zygomatic here. So it's mostly receiving, buccinator is mostly receiving from the buccal branch. So now we have all these muscles here which have been seen. We see that the arterial supply will be the facial artery as such. Facial artery with all the facial muscles which have been seen. So these are all the muscles which are involved. Posteriorly, you need to know that posteriorly here we have instead the occipitalis, and located above here we are going to have the epicranial aponeurosis. So these are the muscles, the facial muscles which have been studied. Now let's move to the next muscles, the muscles of mastication. Now to study the muscles of mastication, need to know that there are different muscles of mastication, 4 in numbers. The first muscle of mastication, there are 4 muscles of mastication. Number 1 is temporalis, number 2 is masseter, number 3 medial and lateral pterygoid. These are the 4 muscles involved in mastication, also applied by trigeminal nerve. Now this muscle here is a temporalis muscle. Now they say temporalis fascia just because I didn't remove the fascia bone. So in order to remove the fascia, I'll just come here and I remove the fascia. Now when I've dissected the fascia, I'm now having the temporalis muscle here. So the temporalis muscle, we see that it originates in the temporal fossa, as we have studied in the bones. The insertion is ramus of conoid process. So it's going to insert at the level of the coronoid process. The coronoid process was here. It's somewhere here. So when we isolate the muscles, so let's see, when we isolate the muscle, we now see very well where it's going to insert. So it's going to insert at the level of the coronoid process so the insertion at the level of coronoid process of the mandible. The action is the vertical part elevation. So when it's going to act by Newton's third law. We know that Newton's third law states that for any action force there is an equal but opposite reaction force, but here we realize that the mandible is movable and this one is at a rigid position. So the temporal fossa is rigid, it's not movable, but the mandible is movable. So you have an action force. So the action force upon contraction is going to cause the action and movement towards this side. So it's going to do a vertical elevation of the mandible, of the mouth as such here. So this for the temporalis major. Now let's see the nerve supply to the temporalis muscle. So isolate the nerve. We see that it received the nerves from the trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve is internal here. So we are going to have the trigeminal nerve, the mandibular part of the trigeminal nerve. So the mandibular part of the trigeminal nerve is going to come out from the foramen ovale, and it's going to supply to the temporalis major as such here. So now let's see the arterial supply to the mandibular nerve. Arterial supply to mandibular nerve. We come up, we realize that it is from the superficial temporal artery and the maxillary artery, as we're going to see in our next tutorial. So now, after studying the temporal muscle, you need to study the next muscle of mastication, which is the masseter. So the masseter is this one here. Masseter is used, so let's isolate the masseter to see where its origin and insert. The origin of masseter is here. So the masseter is used to connect this portion of the zygomatic bone. So it originates from zygomatic bone and insert at the level of the angle of the mandible here. And action is elevation, adduction. So when you can see a very prominent adduction when you are at the level of herbivores. Have you already realized that when you see a goat eating, realize that he moves the mandible sideward. He can move mandible sideward. He can move the mandible sideward due to the location of the zygomaticus. Look very well. Upon looking on the posterior side, we see that the zygomaticus is more lateral compared to the mandible. So when you are going to do an action, the action is going to cause at the same time an elevation, and also going to cause a lateral movement, a slight lateral movement, and this is why you can see them in most of the time in herbivores. So this lateral movement is going to be the adduction. So these are the two main movements which are used with the masseter, and the nervous supply is the masseteric nerve from the trigeminal nerve. So now let's see, isolate the nervous supply, the nerve to the masseter. Now it comes from the trigeminal nerve. You see from here that internally there is a trigeminal nerve here, and this is the masseter here. So this portion of the trigeminal nerve of the superior is the auditory, the oculotemporal nerve. The oculotemporal nerve corresponds to the part of the artery called the superficial temporal artery. This is the oculotemporal nerve. So now the next portion, the next muscle we are going to deal with is going to be found much more deep. This is why we are going to remove and dissect other muscles. So we remove the muscles and we have the next muscles. So the next muscle is this one. So this is a deep part of the masseter. So we have forgotten to say that the masseter has two portions, the superficial part which was seen initially, and we have the deep part. The deep part also have an isolate. So let's isolate it. So when you isolate, you have the zygomatic arc, the origin, the insertion is now instead the ramus and not the angle of the mandible, and the masseteric nerve is still the supply. So it's going to have the same content as with the mandible, with the arterial supply. Let's see the arterial supply to the mandible now, and we isolate it. So the arterial supply will be from the fascial artery and also from this artery here. The artery here is the transverse fascial artery. These are the two main arteries that are involved with the supply with the masseter. So now, going again more deep, we have other muscles here. So let's take the mandible and we hide it. So when we hide the mandible, you can see another muscle here. This muscle is a medial pterygoid muscle, and this other muscle here is going to be the lateral pterygoid muscle. So now let's see the major pterygoid muscle. You see that the major pterygoid muscle is connected to the portion of the portion of the mandible I've initially removed. So let's isolate it. So we isolate the major pterygoid muscle. We are going to have this. So you see that the major pterygoid muscle, it originates from the, you see it very well, it's originated instead from the lateral plate. See that it's originate between the lateral and the medial plate. So the major pterygoid muscle, this is the lateral plate of the sphenoid bone, and this is the medial plate of the sphenoid bone. So the major pterygoid muscle originates between the lateral and medial plate, and that portion is the pterygoid fossa. It originates in the pterygoid fossa to the angle of mandible. So it consists of two portions. It has one head originating in the pterygoid fossa to the angle of mandible, and another head here. So let's see the portion of the origin of the other head originates from the maxillary bone and ends up in the angle of the mandible, at the angle of mandible here. So that's the origin and insertion of the major pterygoid muscle. So now, after having a major pterygoid muscle origin and insertion, we can pass now to the next one, which is the motion. So the motion of major pterygoid muscle, we have this. So this is the action of the major pterygoid muscle done performed here. Now can pass to the next portion. After visualizing the action of the major pterygoid muscle, we can now go to the next part, which is the artery, the nervous supply to the major pterygoid muscle. Now we can isolate the nerve supply to major pterygoid muscle. We see that it's going to receive from the mandibular portion of the trigeminal nerve. After receiving from mandibular portion, we see the artery. The artery, we isolate the artery. We realize that it's going to receive from the internal one. This is the maxillary artery, which is going to supply the major pterygoid muscle. So now we all have this. This is what was seen for major pterygoid muscle. Next one is the lateral pterygoid muscle here. The lateral pterygoid muscle, you need to know that it originates, when we isolate it, we can see its origin and insertion. It's going to originate from here, the lateral. So let's verify very well. We see that it originates from the lateral plate. It originates from the lateral plate of the sphenoid bone and the lateral pterygoid plate, and it inserts here posteriorly. So let's see very well the location of the insertion. Location of insertion is at the level of the mandible, at the neck of the mandible, at the level of the condylar process. So we have the original insertion done. We can now find the motion. So lateral pterygoid muscle, it has two movements. One movement is protraction, and this is protraction, the movement of protraction performed of the lateral pterygoid muscle. So you see that it is slightly moving sideward as such, and the other movement can be seen here. So we have one movement, protraction of the lateral pterygoid muscle, and we have the next movement, which can be the other movement is lateral movement. We have lateral movement again, just as adduction as the other one did. So we had protraction and we have lateral movement performed by the lateral pterygoid muscle. So now the next muscle to verify again, we can verify the nervous supply. We see the nervous supply is already from mandibular nerve. For the fascial artery, we see that these are the arteries which are going to be involved in the supply here, with the fascial artery and this other artery which comes here. So this artery here is a maxillary artery. So these are the two main arteries which are involved in the fascia with the lateral pterygoid muscle. So we have already seen the main muscles involved there. So now let's visualize the muscles which are found inside the tympanic cavity. So we will hide the tympanic cavity. So now we find ourselves inside the tympanic cavity and we increase the number of muscles. Normally, upon increasing the number of muscles of the tympanic cavity, we are supposed to find the tensor tympani. We are supposed to find two muscles here, the tensor tympani and the stapedius muscles, which are located with the stapedius muscle is located on the stapes muscle, on the stapes bone, and it is used to reduce the frequency of sound which is entering the ear. And now the tensor muscle is used to reduce the amplitude of sound which is entering into the ear. So those are the two main muscles. So the stapedius damps the frequency of sound, while the tensor tympani is going to damp the amplitude of sound. So normally we are supposed to find those two muscles, but they are not very prominent. So now let's visualize other muscles, the palate muscles, by fading the maxillary bone. So we fade the maxillary bone, or we just hide it. We hide the next maxillary bone. Now you are going to visualize this muscle, we hide it. So we start removing the different muscles when we hide. So normally we are also supposed to visualize two other muscles here, but I think they are much more internal than external. So if we can visualize posteriorly there, we are supposed to find that we have two other muscles, which are the levator tympani and the tensor tympani. So these are the two other muscles: the levator palatini muscle and the tensor palatini muscle. The levator palatini muscle will be used in elevating the soft palate. It's going to be used in elevating the soft palate, while the tensor palatine is going to be used to depress. We have the depressor palatine, which is used to depress the soft palate, and we have the tensor palatine, which is going to be used to tense the soft palate. And all this is used when you have motions of when you have to convert between respiration and eating. So normally, upon the process of when you are masticating, when somebody is masticating, so let's see, visualize the action of muscles of mastication. Come to temporal muscle. Now we find the motion. Now, when somebody is as such, so when somebody is in the process of mastication as such, what happens is that at the level of the epiglottis is going to close when the person is going to eat food, when the person is going to swallow food, and also the tensor, the soft palate is also going to close. The soft palate is closing by the use of the tensor palatini and the use of the levator palatine. These are the two main muscles that are going to be used in order to close the soft palate. And also the epiglottis close. This is in order to close to make sure that the respiratory system is closed from the oral system. So when the person swallows, it's going to enter the digestive system and without entering into the lungs. And also when he swallows, it does not enter back into the nasal cavity in order to have a nasal regurgitation of the food. So this is how mastication is mixtured, and this is a function of the mandible in elevation. The next function of the mandible can be seen in retraction. So these are the functions of retraction. It pushes behind and it pushes in front. So these are the functions of the retraction. It pushes slightly behind and pushes in front because of its location here. The mandible, we said, we can go now in the next portion. We have the mandible. You can see its function. The motion of the mandible is in elevation. So we have the superficial part used in elevation. Now let's go to the deep part of the mandible. So converting, we remove this, and then you take the deep part. The deep part still function in elevation. So these are the function of the different muscles. So from here we've seen all the muscles of the head, and hope you are going to like for and subscribe for the channel Science Makers. Thanks for your kind attention.